When Keanu Reeves' car gives out just outside a dusty, overlooked auto shop, he expects nothing more than a quick fix and to be on his way. But inside, under flickering fluorescent lights, a solitary elderly mechanic works alone. His hands are worn, his expression focused, and his silence speaks volumes. There's something about the man, his meticulous touch, his quiet presence, that lingers in Keanu's mind long after he drives away. A week passes. Keanu returns, intending to offer his thanks. But when he pulls up, the garage is dark, the entrance shut. What he discovers next stops him cold, leaving him stunned in the middle of the road. Before we dive deeper, tell us where you're watching from, and if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow, we're bringing you something else just as powerful. The Los Angeles sun was sinking behind the skyline, washing the city in a warm golden hue. On the far edge of town sat a small, old-school auto repair shop, long forgotten by time. Inside, Henry Carter wiped oil off his hands and let out a tired exhale. At 72, he'd spent nearly his whole life fixing cars. His one-man operation had endured decades, outlasting flashy chains and dealership garages, not because it looked impressive, but because people trusted him. But trust didn't pay for medication. Henry pressed a hand to his chest as a dull ache throbbed beneath his ribs. It had become more frequent lately. Just fatigue, he told himself. He couldn't afford to be unwell. Just as he was closing up for the night, the sputtering growl of an engine in distress echoed through the lot. He turned toward the open garage and squinted. A sleek red Ferrari, an older model in immaculate condition, rolled to a halt. It didn't belong in this place, more suited to showrooms than his gritty workspace. The engine gave one final cough and died. Seconds later, the door opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a fitted black leather jacket and dark denim. He slipped off his sunglasses with a relaxed ease. He looked more like someone walking off a film set than someone needing car help. He approached Henry, his tone polite and calm. "Evening. Mind taking a quick look?" Henry eyed the car, then the man. Something about his face tickled recognition, but he couldn't quite place it. Probably just another wealthy driver with a fancy toy, he figured. With a dry grunt, Henry muttered, "Bit too flashy for my taste." The man chuckled. "A car's still a car, right?" Henry allowed a smirk. "An engine's an engine." Without another word, he grabbed his toolbox and popped the hood, unaware that the man before him was Keanu Reeves. As Henry leaned over the open engine bay, his skilled hands began their practiced rhythm, testing, adjusting, diagnosing. The man stood beside him, watching with genuine curiosity, arms crossed casually. "You run this place by yourself?" he asked. "Always have," Henry replied with a gruff but honest tone. "These days, people don't fix things. They just replace parts and call it a day, charge a fortune while they're at it." The man nodded, clearly interested. "I admire that. You're the real deal." Henry scoffed. "Damn right." But as he worked, a sharp jolt surged through his chest. He stiffened for a moment, then shook it off. Just a twinge. Nothing he couldn't handle. He still had a job to finish. As the man leaned in slightly, watching the older mechanic work, Henry mumbled, "I can get this running again. Just give me a few minutes." What neither of them knew was that this wouldn't be just another routine fix. In this quiet visit, it was about to set something far bigger in motion. The cool breeze of Los Angeles evenings began to set in, but inside Henry Carter's cramped garage, it was warm with the scent of grease, steel, and decades of dedication. Henry, sleeves rolled up and a wrench in hand, leaned over the Ferrari's open hood. His experienced eyes moved across the engine block, hunting down the issue with the kind of precision only time could teach. Nearby, the tall man in the black jacket stood still, quietly observing. He didn't fidget or pace, just watched with a patient curiosity. Henry had seen his type before, rich men with luxury rides, more style than substance. But there was something different about this one. As Henry adjusted a belt and twisted a stubborn bolt, he muttered under his breath, "Too many wires, too many computers." Cars used to have soul. The man grinned. I like people who fix things the right way. Henry glanced over. Then you picked the wrong town, kid. The man laughed, but not in mockery. He understood. Still, he didn't say much more. Henry turned back to the engine. His breathing was slightly heavier than usual. A dull pressure sat in his chest, not sharp, not unbearable, just there. But he ignored it. He'd powered through worse. He always did. The man, now crouching a little closer to see Henry's technique, asked, "You been doing this long?" Henry didn't even look up. 50 years. Opened this place in 74. Kept it running since. That's rare, the man said with admiration. Wiping his hands on a dirty rag, Henry gave the stranger a sideways glance. What do you do? The man smiled faintly. Entertainment industry. Henry raised an eyebrow. Music? Movies? A split second of hesitation. Movies. Henry let out a low grunt. Figures. Some Hollywood guy driving a Ferrari. The man laughed. It's not mine. Borrowed it from a buddy. But I've always liked good machines. Henry gave a slight nod. At least you treat it like more than a trophy. Most guys with money don't know a spark plug from a spoon. The man's smile faded a bit. Never cared much for trophies. Henry returned to his work, hand tightening around the wrench. But then, pain. A sudden, burning pressure in his chest. He paused, gritted his teeth, and steadied himself. The pain faded after a few seconds, leaving him breathless. He didn't let it show. He adjusted one final component, tested the belt tension, and stepped back. All right, he grunted. Give it a try. The man slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and the Ferrari roared back to life. Smooth, powerful, perfect. Henry crossed his arms, nodding. There she goes. The man stepped out, visibly impressed. Sounds better than ever. He reached for his wallet. How much do I owe you? Henry shook his head. Nothing. Wasn't a tough job. Just come back if she acts up again. The man paused, genuinely surprised. You sure? Don't charge for easy work, Henry said plainly. It's how I run things. The man studied him, then smiled. All right. I'll come back. And I'll bring you a coffee. Henry smirked. Just don't bring that overpriced Starbucks junk. The man chuckled, stepping into the Ferrari. As he rolled the window down, he called out, See you around, Mr. Carter. Henry gave a grunt of acknowledgement, watching the red Ferrari pull into the street and disappear into the city night. He had no idea who that man really was. And no clue just how much that brief encounter would change everything. As the red tail lights of the Ferrari disappeared down the quiet road, Henry locked up his shop. The ache in his chest returned, sharper this time. He leaned against the doorframe, breath caught, eyes narrowing. Just a moment. Just another twinge. Nothing serious. That's what he told himself. The pain passed, and Henry shook it off like he always did. He turned off the lights and stepped into the night, unaware that across the city, the man he'd just helped couldn't get him out of his mind. Keanu Reeves drove through the sleeping streets of Los Angeles, the soft hum of the Ferrari's engine barely audible. His hands were relaxed on the steering wheel, but his mind wasn't on the road. It was back in that garage. Something about that man, Henry Carter. He'd met thousands of people in his lifetime, walked among the elite, worked with legends. But there was a different kind of dignity in Henry. No cameras. No ego. Just calloused hands and honest work. By the time Keanu got home, his curiosity had grown into something more. He poured himself a glass of water, sat down, and opened his laptop. He typed, Henry Carter Auto Repair Los Angeles. The top result was a plain, no-frills website. No videos. No promotions. Just the name. Carter's Auto Repair, honest work since 1974. Keanu clicked through the bare-bones pages. A few old photos loaded slowly, grainy snapshots of Henry as a younger man, smiling in front of the shop, a wrench always in hand. There was a sense of pride in those photos. Purpose. Then he noticed something else. A link labeled Customer Stories. Keanu clicked. It opened a simple page filled with forum-style comments, testimonials left by customers over the years. He leaned closer to the screen, reading. Henry fixed my car for free when I couldn't pay. Said to bring the money when I could. I never forgot that. Stayed late just to help me make it to my night shift. Refused a tip. My dad brought a Chevy here for 30 years. When he passed, Henry got it running again so we could take it to the funeral. Keanu's jaw tightened. His hand gripped the edge of the laptop. This wasn't just a mechanic. This man was a quiet hero, holding up an entire community without asking for recognition. And no one seemed to know. Keanu sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. He'd only spent an hour with Henry, but he now understood something clearly. Henry Carter wasn't just another man with a wrench. He was the kind of man people should remember. And Keanu couldn't just leave it at that. Not now. Keanu leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the screen, heart heavy. He wanted to do something. Not just to say thank you, but to honor Henry in a way that truly mattered. But money? That wouldn't work. Henry had already refused to take a single dollar. So what did a man like Henry value? Keanu thought back to the garage, the way Henry talked about repairing things properly. How he criticized modern shops for tossing parts instead of understanding the machine. That meant something to him. That was his pride. And then, it clicked. Keanu smiled to himself. This wasn't about charity. It was about legacy. Just as he reached for his phone to call someone he knew could help him build something meaningful, his screen lit up. Unknown number. He hesitated. Then answered. Hello? A shaky voice replied, Hey, is this Keanu Reeves? Keanu's brows knit. Who's this? The voice responded, Name's Bill. I own the laundromat across from Henry Carter's shop. Keanu straightened in his chair. How did you get this number? Bill hesitated. I saw you at his shop. Thought maybe you'd want to know. Know what? Keanu asked sharply. There was a sigh on the other end. Henry's in the hospital. Been there since Monday. Keanu froze. His stomach dropped. He had planned to go back tomorrow, bring him that coffee. Say thank you. Now he wasn't sure tomorrow would even come. I'm on my way, Keanu said and hung up. The streets were quieter than usual as Keanu sped through the city. The Ferrari moved fast, but Keanu's thoughts raced faster. Something in his gut told him this wasn't just a checkup or a flu. He arrived at Carter's Auto Repair within minutes. The place looked different now, eerily still. The garage lights were off. The front gate was locked. And taped to the door was a wrinkled sheet of paper. Keanu stepped out, boots crunching the gravel. He approached the door and read. Closed until further notice. His jaw tightened. It was real. Henry wasn't here. And hadn't been, for days. He stood silently, trying to process, when he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw a man in his 60s wearing a worn-out flannel shirt. The man stopped near the laundromat, his eyes soft with recognition. You're the guy from the other night, right? He asked. Keanu gave a slight nod. You're Bill? The man nodded, stepping closer. Yeah, sorry for calling out of nowhere. Just figured you'd want to know. What happened? Keanu asked. Bill rubbed his beard, his tone weighed with guilt. Henry collapsed while working on a customer's truck. Tried to tough it out, like always, but one of the regulars found him hunched over the workbench. Keanu's heart sank. He remembered that slight wince Henry made while working on the Ferrari. The pause. The hand to the chest. He should have said something. He should have stayed. Where is he now? Keanu asked, voice firm. County General, Bill replied. Been there since Monday. Keanu was already heading for his car when Bill called after him. Listen, Henry's been holding this street together longer than I've had gray hair. But now I don't know if he's got any fight left in him. Keanu turned to face him, jaw clenched. Then he got in the car and drove. He wasn't going to wait for another maybe later. Because Henry Carter didn't deserve to be just another forgotten man. County General's fluorescent lights buzzed quietly as Keanu Reeves walked through the hospital corridors with purpose. The smell of disinfectant and stale coffee lingered in the air, but he ignored it. This wasn't about him. This was about Henry. At the front desk, a nurse looked up and blinked in mild surprise. She clearly recognized him but, to her credit, didn't make a scene. I'm looking for Henry Carter, Keanu said gently. He was admitted a few days ago. She typed quickly, then nodded. Room 317. Third floor. He's stable, but don't expect a long chat. Thanks, Keanu replied and made his way to the elevator. The hospital room was dim, quiet except for the soft beep of a heart monitor. Henry lay in the bed, pale, frail, tubes in his arms and a faint oxygen line under his nose. The strong, stubborn mechanic Keanu had met just days ago now looked like a man running out of time. Keanu stood silently by the door for a moment, watching. Then, slowly, Henry's eyes opened. Damn, he muttered, voice raspy. Don't tell me that damn car broke again. Keanu chuckled and stepped closer. Still runs like a dream. Henry gave a tired smirk, then winced slightly as he adjusted his position. A hand moved to his chest again. Keanu sat down beside the bed. How bad is it? Henry gave a half shrug, the motion slow and clearly difficult. Docs say this OL heart of mine's had enough. Can't be patched up with a wrench. Keanu looked at him, expression hard to read. But inside, it hit like a punch. This wasn't a scare. This was real. Let me help, Henry, he said softly. Henry chuckled dryly. Kid. I know who you are. You're rich, you're famous. I know where this is going, and I don't want your money. Keanu leaned in. I'm not trying to make a donation. Henry turned his head slowly. Then what are you trying to do? I want to pay your bills. All of them. Henry's face grew serious. He stared at Keanu for a long beat, then shook his head. No, he said firmly. I don't do charity. Keanu didn't argue. He understood. Henry wasn't just proud, he was built on self-reliance. It wasn't about pride. It was about principle. He had stood on his own 2 feet for over 5 decades. He wasn't going to lean now. Keanu sat back. Thought for a moment. Then answer me this, he said. You built something, Henry. Are you really just going to let it disappear? Henry frowned. What are you talking about? Your shop. Your work. Everything you've done. What happens when you're not there anymore? Henry looked away. Then, it closes. And that's okay with you? Keanu asked. Silence. Keanu could see it. The weight of it. The sadness beneath the gruff. Then he leaned forward, voice lower. I have an idea. Henry narrowed his eyes. Of course you do. Keanu gave a half smile. Just hear me out. Henry sighed and nodded once. And in that moment, a door opened, not just in conversation, but in destiny. Because the man who had spent his life fixing broken things was about to get something fixed for him. Once Henry was stable enough to be discharged, Keanu put his plan into motion. He didn't waste time. The very next morning, calls were made, papers signed, and sketches drawn. Over the next several weeks, Carter's auto repair began to change, but not in a way that erased its soul. The old wooden sign that hung crookedly above the door was taken down. In its place, a sleek, new one was installed, crafted from metal but styled like something from the 1970s. The new name shimmered in fresh black lettering. The Henry Carter Technical Garage. Henry grumbled when he saw it. "I don't need my damn name on a building," he muttered. Keanu had just smiled. "It's not a building. It's a story." That shut him up, for once. On opening day, the turnout was bigger than anyone had expected. Former customers, families, kids who barely knew how to hold a wrench, dozens showed up. Some came for the memories. Others came for the promise of learning. Inside, the once quiet, dim shop now bustled with energy. But it hadn't lost its character. The original workbenches, the decades-old tool chests, even the clock that hadn't ticked properly in years, remained right where they'd always been. Keanu didn't center himself in the spotlight. He stood near the back, watching as people gathered, laughed, and asked questions. His eyes stayed on Henry. Henry, now slightly thinner and moving slower, still barked like he always had. "No, not like that," he shouted at a nervous 19-year-old trying to loosen a bolt. "Hold the damn wrench like you mean it." The boy blinked, then corrected his grip. Keanu chuckled quietly. Henry wasn't changing. And that's exactly why this was going to work. Later that evening, the shop finally quieted. Henry locked up the front gate and found Keanu leaning against a post out front. He walked over, slower than before, but steady. "I guess I owe you one," Henry said, voice softer than usual. Keanu didn't flinch. "Nah. You already paid me back." Henry frowned. "How the hell did I do that?" Keanu turned slightly and gestured to the building behind them. "By proving that the right way is still worth teaching." Henry followed his gaze. The shop glowed softly in the dusk, its new sign catching the golden light. For a long moment, he just stood there. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt proud. Weeks passed, and the Henry Carter Technical Garage wasn't just running, it was thriving. But it wasn't just a place to fix cars anymore. It had become something deeper. Students began showing up, young men and women from the neighborhood who'd never turned a wrench before. They came curious, uncertain, some just looking for something to believe in. What they found was Henry. He didn't sugarcoat things. Didn't coddle. But he taught. "Feel the engine," he'd growl. "Don't just read the damn screen. Machines talk, you just gotta know how to listen." The students would laugh nervously, but they listened. And over time, they learned. Not just about motors, but about discipline, about patience, about doing things right even when no one's watching. Keanu visited often, but never announced his presence. He'd watch from the side, arms folded, smiling as Henry scolded one kid and then quietly helped another get a stubborn bolt loose. He'd sit in the corner, sip his coffee, not Starbucks, of course, and let Henry lead. One afternoon, a local reporter came by, tipped off by word of mouth. The garage had become a little legend. When the journalist asked Henry how all this had started, Henry had simply pointed to the far end of the lot where Keanu was talking to one of the students. "Ask him," Henry said. But Keanu didn't want the spotlight. "This place was already something," he told the reporter. "All I did was shine a light on it." One night, long after the tools were packed away and the garage lights were dimmed, Henry and Keanu sat on two old folding chairs in front of the building. They didn't talk much. Just sat. Stars twinkled above the quiet street. Then Henry finally spoke. "You know, I never thought any of this would matter to anyone but me." Keanu looked over. "It mattered." Henry nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess it did." And that silence between them? It wasn't empty. It was full. Of meaning. Of respect. Of legacy. By the time summer rolled in, word had spread. Not just through the neighborhood, but across the city. Young mechanics from all walks of life began applying for apprenticeships at the Henry Carter Technical Garage. Retired engineers came to volunteer their time. Even local schools sent students on field trips to watch the man who'd become something of a myth, an old-school mechanic whose shop had turned into a haven of purpose. But Henry, true to form, never let it get to his head. When one student shyly asked if it felt weird being famous now, Henry snorted, "Famous don't fix engines." He wasn't wrong. One day, Keanu arrived to find a small crowd gathered out front. A teenage girl was standing on a wooden crate, reciting a poem she'd written. Her father, a former customer, had once told her how Henry had repaired their car for free when money was tight. She never forgot. Henry listened from behind the garage door, arms crossed. He didn't move. But his eyes? They said everything. When she finished, the crowd clapped. Henry gave a single nod from the shadows. Later that evening, Keanu found him cleaning a carburetor like it was just any other day. "That was something," Keanu said softly. Henry didn't look up. People get emotional. They'll move on. But Keanu saw through him. Henry was moved. Deeply. Even if he'd never admit it. That night, Keanu wrote something in a small notebook he carried with him. It was just a sentence. Some people fix engines. Others fix the world, one bolt at a time. And underneath that, one name. Henry Carter. It happened without warning. One quiet morning, the garage didn't open. The usual buzz of students, clanking tools, and Henry's signature bark was missing. Keanu arrived first, sensing something was off. The gate was still locked. The inside, silent. He knocked gently on the side door, no answer. He called Bill from the laundromat, who arrived a few minutes later, eyes already clouded. "He didn't show up for coffee either," Bill said quietly. They both knew what that meant. Keanu drove straight to the hospital. This time, there were no long hallways or distant elevators. Just a small room with a window cracked open, the breeze gently moving the curtains. Henry lay in the bed, eyes closed, the rise and fall of his chest faint but steady. A nurse stood nearby. "He's not in pain," she said softly. "But he's been slipping in and out. You might not have long." Keanu nodded and stepped to the bedside. He sat quietly for a while, saying nothing. Just being there. Then, without opening his eyes, Henry spoke. "You again." Keanu smiled faintly. "Told you I'd be back." Henry's lips curled into a barely there grin. "You always keep your word?" "Only when it matters." A pause. "Shop still standing?" Henry asked. "Better than ever." "Those kids still breaking bolts?" Keanu chuckled. "Every day." Henry let out a tired breath. "Good." Silence returned. But it wasn't heavy. It was calm. Clean. Like the sound of an engine that had finally stopped after a job well done. Keanu sat there long after Henry drifted back to sleep. He didn't need to say goodbye. Some people never really leave. Henry Carter passed away quietly in his sleep 2 nights later. There were no grand headlines. No televised tributes. Just a small printed notice on the community board outside the shop that read, "Henry Carter, 72. Mechanic. Mentor. Friend. 1949 to 2021. But what followed was far from small. On the morning of his memorial, people poured into the street. Old customers. Former students. Neighbors. Some brought flowers. Others brought stories. And a few, those who had once been lost, brought tools, wearing grease-stained shirts in his honor. Keanu stood among them, unnoticed by many, exactly how he preferred it. He watched as a teenage girl stood near the front of the crowd and read the same poem she had shared with him weeks earlier. This time, people cried. Not because Henry was gone, but because he had mattered. Inside the garage, the new sign gleamed above the workbenches. The Henry Carter Technical Garage, since 1974. And beneath it, etched in steel. Because some things deserve to be done right. Keanu stepped inside alone after the crowd had left. The shop still smelled like oil and metal and memories. He walked over to Henry's old stool. On it sat a notebook Henry had used to sketch out repairs. Keanu opened it. On the last page, in fading ink, Henry had scribbled one line. "Teach them the real way. That's all that matters." Keanu closed the book gently and set it back down. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting the garage in a familiar golden glow. Weeks later, Keanu returned once more. Not as a visitor, but as part of the garage. The students still came. The tools still clanged. And the stories of Henry Carter continued, not through words, but through hands, young and old, who chose to do things the right way. Because sometimes, the greatest lives aren't lived in spotlight. They're lived one honest fix at a time. And those never fade.